Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Tips and Tools to Engage Your Community in a Digital Environment. I'm Melissa Keene. I will be your moderator and host this morning. I'm a program manager with the Institute for Local Government. So ensuring inclusive public participation is more challenging than ever because of physical distancing requirements, the digital divide, language access challenges, and technology learning curves. This webinar will share innovative strategies for using high-tech and low-tech virtual platforms to engage residents on a variety of topics without being able to meet face-to-face. I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our partners with the Municipal Management Associations of Northern California and Southern California. I'm going to give each of them just a minute to share a little bit of information about their organizations and how they support local government in both segments of the state. First up, we have Hayley Reed with MMANC. Hayley?
Hi, good morning. I just want to welcome everybody to our webinar Wednesday. So MMANC is our Northern California Municipal Management Association, and we have kind of converted to our webinar Wednesdays to make sure that we're keeping everybody engaged and involved. We do have another segment coming up next Wednesday, which more information will be provided at the end of this webinar. And MMANC is a great way to stay engaged with your regional partners in Northern California and Southern California. And we just want to say thank you to ILG for hosting this week's webinar.
Thanks, Hayley. And we have Izzy with MMASC. Izzy?
Hi, good morning, and thank you, Melissa, and thank you to ILG for putting this webinar together. MMASC values its partnership with ILG, so thank you. A little bit about MMASC. MMASC was formed in 1953 to address the professional needs of local government professionals and their private sector partners. We have over 700 members ranging from the San Luis Obispo County all the way down to the Mexican US border, both San Diego and Imperial counties. Our focus is on providing high quality professional development opportunities for our members, and we're happy that we can partner with ILG on this webinar. Similar to MMANC, we are holding a summer webinar series, and our next segment will be on August 6th, and it's on the topic of managing performance in a virtual world. And our annual conference will be October 26th through the 29th. And looking forward to our members to participate in those sessions as well. So thank you very much, Melissa.
Thank you, Hayley and Izzy. Definitely encourage you all to take a look at their websites corresponding to the part of the state that you're in and check out their resources and trainings and other things available to our local government partners. Here's a high-level agenda of what we're going to cover today. So obviously right now we're doing a welcome and a quick overview. I'm going to share a little bit of information about the Institute for Local Government in case you're not familiar. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why we're all here today and do some instant polling, both to demonstrate an engagement opportunity for virtual meetings, but also to hear a little bit more from you all about where you sit in local government and the challenges you're facing. Then we have a few presentations. We have Margaret with us from the San Francisquito Creek Joint Powers Authority, Rose Newberry with Dudek, and Brooke Beare with the city of Indio, and then I'm going to share some tips from ILG's perspective at the end. We do have some time held for Q&A, and then we will also share our contact information for any follow-up that's needed. So some quick logistics before we jump in. Due to the number of attendees we have, everybody has been muted for the duration of the webinar. So that doesn't mean you can't ask us questions. So at any point during the webinar, please feel free to type any questions you have into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. As I just mentioned, we have time held at the end to go through as many questions as possible, and then definitely feel free to follow up with us if we don't get to your question. So a little bit about ILG. We are the nonprofit training and education affiliate of the League of California Cities, the California State Association of Counties, and the California Special Districts Association. We provide practical and easy-to-use resources so local governments can effectively implement policies on the ground. So again, we work with local governments statewide to provide education and training, technical assistance, capacity building, and convening services in a variety of areas. Our civics education and workforce program helps create a pipeline to public service and facilitate municipal school partnerships to really increase interest in local government as a career path. Our Sustainable Communities program focuses on things like housing and land use, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reductions, and connecting local governments with cap and trade dollars and things of that nature. Our leadership and governance program both provides the mandated state trainings for local governments, things like the Ethics AB 1234 training and harassment prevention, but also provides resources and training to help local governments operate more efficiently and effectively and build trust in their communities. And then lastly, our public engagement program, which is why we're all here today, focuses on helping embed public engagement into local government operations, everything from getting started to dealing with difficult meeting participants to why we're here today to talk about virtual engagement. But we have a ton of resources and trainings on this topic, so please, after today, take a look at our website to see more on that topic. So our presenters this morning, as I just mentioned, are Margaret Bruce, Rose Newberry, and Brooke Beare. Margaret has decades of professional experience in energy, water, and sustainability program leadership and advocacy. She is the new executive director of the San Francisquito Creek Joint Powers Authority, which coordinates flood risk management mitigation projects benefiting the communities of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto, impacted by tides, sea level rise, and creek flooding. While sheltering in place, Margaret can be found accessorizing with cat hair and tending to the excessive number of tomato plants in her garden. Rose is a community planner specializing in climate action, adaptation, and environmental justice planning. Her work focuses on engaging a diverse group of stakeholders to create healthy and sustainable communities, aligning state goals, community dreams, and zoning codes. And Brooke is the Director of Communications and Marketing for the City of Indio, known as the City of Festivals. Indio is the largest and most populous city in the Coachella Valley. She moved to the desert near Palm Springs in 2003 to work for the CBS affiliate as a reporter and morning news anchor. Over the next 16 years, she established herself as a respected investigative journalist, working in San Diego, and also eventually as the evening news anchor in Palm Springs. In 2019, she won an Emmy from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Pacific Southwest chapter. Later that year, she made a huge career change, allowing for another opportunity to communicate a story or vision to the community. In her current role, she works closely with individuals, organizations, the media, and businesses to realize the goals and plans of the City of Indio. So before we get started, as I mentioned, we would like to do a little bit of polling with you all. So again, this is an opportunity to see one of these tools in real time. So please humor us and go to sift.ly either on your smartphone or on your internet browser, and then enter the code 7MPC. We have just a few questions for you all that hopefully will give us a better sense of who's joining us in the audience, as well as what some of the challenges and opportunities you all see are. I'm going to give you just a few more seconds to get connected. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first question, but the code will still be at the top of the screen. So if you're still trying to get connected, don't worry. Just want to get this question started so you guys can see how this works. So how many cups of coffee had you had this morning? And hopefully you're all seeing the real-time results on the screen there. Perfect. I am always surprised by the large amount of people that don't drink coffee, almost 40%. Yeah. So you can see it changing as people continue to put their answers in, but we're about 32% at 1, 23% at 2, about 5% at 3 or more, and 40% with none. So these next couple of questions are to get a sense of who's joining us today. So which best describes your agency or organization? Are you a city, county, special district, nonprofit? Perfect. So a little over half of you are with a city, about 11% with counties, 12% with special districts, about 6% with nonprofits, 4% with state, and 5% with private. Thank you. So what best describes your relationship with local government? Are you staff, elected official, a consultant, or just an interested party? Perfect. So it looks like the vast majority of you all, about 80%, almost 80%, are staff. Got a few elected officials there, about 3%, a little less than 10% consultants and other. We now have a few questions for you about engagement in this digital world. So how much participation are you seeing in this new virtual environment? Are you seeing more or less than before COVID, or about the same? It looks like most of you are seeing more engagement. We're hearing that a lot. It's a little bit easier for people to engage this way instead of having to physically attend meetings. They can jump on a Zoom or a webinar and participate that way. Obviously, on the flip side of that, some of the digital divide issues have created challenges in some communities in order to get that same level of engagement. So got a good mix here. Majority of you are seeing more than before. This next one is open-ended, so feel free to type in your answers. So what are the most popular tools you all are using? Are you using online surveys or paper surveys, digital meetings, social media, online forums? A lot of Zoom, not surprising. Phone calls even, or lots of different options here. And you can type in more than one. You aren't limited to one response here. All right, I'm going to change this into a word cloud so you guys can see the responses in a little bit different format. That doesn't seem to want to populate. Okay, we'll go back to the list. I think I saw a messenger pigeon there come through. Usually it allows me to put it into a word cloud and you can see the size of the word change based on how many people have used that. But we're obviously seeing a lot of Zoom, a lot of surveys, things like that. So this next question is about challenges. So what are the top 3 challenges you're facing with public engagement? Once you select your top 3, please make sure you submit it so that it goes onto the screen. And you'll see these move around as more people submit their responses. All right, so there's a lot of responses around the need for more effective public engagement tools. Hopefully we can provide you with some suggestions today. Followed closely by insufficient staffing and time. That was something we heard even pre-pandemic, that oftentimes there's a lack of staffing and capacity in local governments. Same time, people participating, that's also a very common challenge. So how do you reach beyond the people that often attend your city council meetings or planning commissioner meetings? You have residents uninformed on the issues, and then politically extreme participants at the bottom, rounding things out. So this next one, particularly as it relates to virtual engagement, what are you all finding hard? Is it keeping people engaged? Is it reaching your harder to reach community members? Reaching a larger audience? Connecting with seniors? Tech issues, yes. Keeping faces on the screen, yeah. A lot of tech issues, it looks like. Harder to reach diverse communities, language barriers, knowing which medium to use, the digital divide. Let me try this one more time and see if I can get the word cloud to populate. speaking of tech issues, well, always make sure you have a plan B. So we'll just keep this as a list. Yeah, so a lot of tech issues and seniors getting, reaching them, virtual meeting overload. Perfect. Thank you all. So on the flip side of this, what are you finding is working well? So what will you likely keep doing even after we are able to meet in person again? Social media, Zoom, reduce travel time, hearing that one a lot. Social media, telework, the convenience of Zoom. Fewer conferences, reduce travel time again. Convenience, yeah, social media. Thinking innovatively, that's a good one. Yes, we've heard the reduced VMT GHG issue. That's always a nice side benefit of not having to travel to all of the meetings. Less paper, yeah. So there's definitely some environmental benefits, right? Perfect. So we do have one more question for you that we'll do a little bit later in the presentation, so please don't completely close out of this. But I'm going to jump back into the presentation mode. So thank you all for participating. I really appreciate your feedback, and that helps us know what challenges you're facing as we continue with the presentation. So just a little bit of context while we're getting started. There's a lot of language that floats around about public engagement, so we just want to make sure we have a shared understanding here as we move forward. So these are kind of three main pieces here. Civic engagement, we think about as residents being involved in their community. So whether that's them coaching their kids' Little League team, being involved in a service organization, joining their PTA, things like that. It's just your residents being actively involved in their community. And then we have the public information and outreach piece. So this is your general communications PIO function from a local government perspective. It's really earmarked by that one-way communication out. You're sharing information with your community on a project or a program or something that you're launching. And then what we mean by public engagement is a whole host of different activities, but it's really, the crux here is that it's two-way communication. So you're sharing information with your community, and then you're getting information back from them, feedback back from them that you're then hopefully incorporating into your decision-making process. So why would you do this? Aside from the fact that there are some legal requirements around this, whether you're doing a general plan update or housing element update or some grant applications, we see a lot of additional benefits of engaging your community. And these kind of build on each other, but you see both from a local government perspective, you have a better understanding of your residents' values and their wants and their vision for their community. And on the flip side of that, your residents are more informed about the issues that you're trying to communicate with them about local government and about how to engage appropriately with you. Hopefully those things taken together lead to improved decision making because you have a better understanding of what your residents want and your residents have a better understanding of what's happening at the local level. Hopefully that leads to more community buy-in and support, which can help with project implementation. So you don't have to go back and revisit issues because your public isn't trying to throw wrenches in things as you move forward. And the end result, we hope, is more trust, both within the community and between the local government and your community members. So we look at public engagement as kind of a spectrum. Some of you might be familiar with this. We borrowed this from IAP2, but it really ranges from things on the left-hand side of your screen is inform. So again, that's that one-way communication out to your community, all the way to the right-hand side, which is empower, which is essentially turning decision-making authority over to your community. In most local government public engagement processes, you're in that kind of inform, consult, involve mode where you're getting information from your community, feedback from your community, and incorporating it into decision-making, but still retaining that final decision-making authority within the local government. So this is important both for in-person events as well as digital engagement, but as you identified, a lot of you find challenges with having the same people participate. So this is how do you reach beyond that? So thinking about who is in your community, who are you trying to reach, whether that's your immigrant communities, and so you need to be thinking about things like language access to low-income individuals or working families, which really might make you think about the time you hold meetings or access to meetings and travel stipends and things like that. The actual access piece in terms of allowing people with disabilities to participate, whether that's closed captioning or other perhaps digital tools that you can use, and then seniors and youth. Seniors obviously was identified as a challenging group to reach for you all. So this is why we're here. So COVID-19 has obviously changed public engagement and how we can do this. A lot of you probably had plans in the works. We're already doing public engagement, and that probably looks like community events, public meetings, and other face-to-face interaction, which obviously is not possible right now. So everything has to be digital. But we do encourage you to think through right now is having that mix of high-tech and low-tech options. So doing the online forums and surveys and websites, but also thinking about some of your folks that may not be able to access some of these tech options or may not be comfortable with those platforms. So thinking through things like phone calls or mailers or other ways that are a little bit lower tech that you can use to engage your community, and coming up with that right balance will definitely be dependent on who you're trying to reach. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Margaret to share a little bit about her experience in with the Joint Powers Authority. Margaret?
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad everyone can join us today. This is a great turnout for this webinar. Thank you for joining us. A few quick words about me. I wasn't always here at the Joint Powers Authority. I am only 1 month in this role, and we probably all have stories about where were you when the pandemic hit. I was at the Santa Clara Valley Water District when we all got the go home and stay home order. And that was a really challenging time for that organization, and I'm sure for many other organizations. And they rose to the occasion, not without difficulty, but I'm sure you can relate to having to find out what the policies are, engage the IT group, make sure that everybody who can work from home has the tools to work from home. And that hurdle was overcome, but there's an awful lot to still be worked out. All of us are struggling with learning how to do and getting better every day at this whole virtual engagement reality. So, you go next slide, Melissa. Melissa, am I running the slides or are you? Thank you. There we go. So it occurs to me that this particular picture of early days of vehicular traffic in some major metropolis in the world might be a representation of where we are right now with our virtual engagement tools. We're all moving through this space. We're all managing to get where we need to go. Mostly we're spending a lot of time trying not to have accidents. There are no lane markers, there are no signal lights, and there aren't really very many rules of the road. So while we're doing this, we are learning as we go. Next slide. One of the things that is helpful to do is think about humor in getting through these frustrating times. I'm sure that folks have seen, maybe even used, a virtual meeting bingo sheet where you can tally how many things you've heard. Is my internet glitchy? My internet is glitchy. I think they froze. Wait, they froze. Am I on mute? Hey, he's on mute. We are, again, learning how to grapple with this new reality, and a little bit of humor, a lot of patience, and a lot of practice are going to be what get us through this time and make this better. Next slide. One of the things that I think has occurred to all of us is that behavioral norms and etiquette about how you conduct yourself in a virtual meeting has not caught up with common practice. Our pandemic accelerated remote work circumstances and the ways we use new technologies and conduct ourselves in group meetings hasn't really caught up with how we do that gracefully and graciously. So I think it's important that we all recognize we're all doing the best we can. The things that we are doing may not always turn out as we plan them to. Imperfection is just going to be a feature, not necessarily a bug. We can't replicate in-person engagement. We can try. There are ways we can structure our engagement events with breakout sessions, with polling questions, with opportunities for participants to network with one another, either before or after the event. Those are things that we can do to make this a little bit more like meeting in person, but we cannot replicate the genuine in-person, eye-to-eye contact that takes place in person. So we need to be patient, remind ourselves that this is difficult for everyone, use humor, be kind, and when there are technical glitches, don't panic, breathe, we'll get through this. Next slide. So one of the things that I think is the foundation of any good, whether it's an in-person or virtual engagement, is answering the question, what do you need to do? There are, of course, many different ways that we engage with the public. We can have one-on-one meet and greets, one-on-one meetings with folks, small group meetings, large group meetings. Maybe this is a regular board or city council meeting, or it could be a larger, more nuanced and ongoing engagement, such as you would use for a capital improvement project or a general plan update, where you really want to engage many different segments of your community, both exchange information and get their feedback, and it's something that takes place over a long period of time. So the tools that you would employ and how you would deploy them are different for each of these circumstances. And one of my tips would be very, very clear about what you need to accomplish so that you can match and design your process and your tool correctly. In the process of doing that, I think it's important to make sure that when you select your tool and deploy it, you make really clear that you dedicate time to explain to your employees, your community members, and if they're participating, your elected officials, how to engage with the tool, how to use the features of whatever tool you've chosen appropriately, and take time to set the norms and expectations for conduct. It will help everyone navigate this challenging time as we go forward. Thank you. This isn't meant to be an advertisement or an endorsement of any of the brands or companies identified in these logos. It's just a representation of a tiny sliver of all of the possible tools that are now out on the market. Software as a service tools that can provide everything from broad citizen polling and opportunities for community members to ask questions, to provide input, to engage in large-scale planning efforts, down to updating your website, or making sure maybe you have a text campaign or have other kinds of social media tools to outreach to the community. Again, matching the tool, and there are so many of them, to the task or tasks that you need is going to help you succeed. It's important also to, when you think about the tools to employ, to make sure that you understand the community that you are engaging with. What are their specific limitations? Do they have language limitations? Is there a digital divide issue? Are there broadband access issues? Are you trying to reach a demographic? As was pointed out in the survey earlier, reaching seniors, reaching disadvantaged communities is very challenging. So how do you do that? How do you target the tool, the approach, and the demographic, and then square that up against your budget and staff resources? This isn't easy, but taking the time to do that, investing the time to ensure that you have thought through those things will save you time and resources in the end. So my tip, my personal experience, having been involved in public engagement, community events at the cusp of the transition from before COVID to during COVID, is that it takes probably 30% longer to plan and implement a virtual event. And I've done many, many events where it's in person, and over time, maybe doing a virtual event will become more efficient, but it was important to invest the time in understanding how the tool worked and making sure that everyone on staff knew how to work the tool and to troubleshoot, making sure that our presentation looked right, sounded right, that we had a script to ensure that audience participants understood how to engage with the tool, much like Melissa did at the early part of this webinar, explaining there's a Q&A section, people are going to be muted to improve sound quality, please send us your questions. All of those little things encourage people's understanding and engagement. Have we told everyone everything they need to know? Have we practiced everything we need to practice? Have we run through this enough times so that we have a confidence that we can do this as well as we could if we were doing this in person? So I recognize very profoundly the limitation of time and staff resources. That was something that was brought out in the polling questions, limitations of resource and time and staff capacity. But to be successful, you have to invest the time. So if you are an elected official or if you are a senior manager, know that you need to dedicate those resources and that time so that your community can successfully continue to be engaged with you and maybe improve their engagement. Next slide. So even after the pandemic, so that's where we are. We have these struggles, we have these challenges, but it could be better. We could use this as an opportunity to spring from the chaos, the learning curve that is so steep, the limited resources, staff that aren't tech savvy, community members that aren't tech savvy, to something better. And what might that look like? What kind of a better could we imagine? An example of how this kind of virtual engagement might actually improve community involvement is that some people are shy or intimidated by the public process. How many people don't come to a city council meeting and fill out a speaker card because just walking down to the city clerk and handing them a speaker card feels like they're shy, and that's sort of scary. Virtual engagement is safer. It's not exactly anonymous, but you're not in a big room with people you don't know. Some people can leave home, whether for childcare or elder care reasons, or because they are quarantined and they are sequestering. They can't leave home, but this still provides a channel for their engagement. Some people have very little free time. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And so not having to drive someplace to participate in a meeting, but just pop in for the part of a presentation, Board of Supervisors meeting, or a committee meeting that's important to them is a great way of staying engaged and informed and involved that doesn't take so much time. And if you make it easy for people to share their thoughts and opinions, virtual engagement can make that a much more convenient way of doing things. So after the pandemic is behind us, what ways of engaging our communities do we want to persist? It can't replace in-person connections. Maybe nothing ever really can, but maybe we can make it easier and make this an additional approach that we can use to make future community engagement even more effective. I also think that one way we can make the future better is that for local governments to engage in advocacy on behalf of closing the digital divide and reducing the burdens of the absence of good broadband, or especially for disadvantaged and rural communities, so that everyone has access to these kinds of tools for their own improvement and for community engagement. So imagine, take a moment and think about how these tools and how your community can come together to be more connected, more involved, more committed to co-creating a vibrant future, with more empowerment to face the challenges we have now and that we'll certainly face in the future. We will emerge from the other side of this pandemic eventually. And I take some encouragement in knowing that we're going to come through this with new tools, new resources, new experience, and new social norms to help us navigate the future in a way that brings more engagement, more connectivity to more people. So that's all I have. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Margaret. On that note, yes, please feel free to ask any questions that you have at any point during the webinar through the questions box. We're monitoring that closely, and we'll get to as many as possible towards the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rose for the next segment of the presentation. Rose?
Sorry, my video always takes a little bit to load. Let me see if I can get that. There we go. Hi, I'm Rose Newberry. I work at Dudek. We're a consulting firm based mostly in California, but the whole west of the United States. And I work in climate change planning. It's already kind of a difficult thing to talk about and get engagement on because it's a little bit of an obtuse topic. And then we hit virtual. So today I'm talking about some lessons we learned on the Indio TCC Transformative Climate Communities Plan and some recommendations. This is a plan where we fully scoped it in January and had to rescope it as soon as we kicked off in March with the pandemic quickly closing in on us. And we're hoping that participants take away kind of how to scope for consultants and thinking through what a full virtual community engagement plan looks like. Next slide. So I'm going to go over the background and challenges of this plan, talk about having an outreach hub, how to design outreach, how to advertise, which is really hard when people are not leaving their homes, and thinking about some deliverables and data, especially when working through a grant-funded project, which is what we're doing. Next slide. So the biggest challenge of this is we were fully ready to go in January to do in-person events, and this all matched a grant application that the city had put in the previous year to the state of California, which really outlined what needed to happen at these in-person events and was funded for in-person events. Then we kick off in March, quickly realize this isn't going to happen. Full credit to the city that they wanted to move forward at the exact same time scale. We weren't going to miss a beat and pivoted really quickly. But this was really, while we're rescoping all the projects, probably my first project that really hit the ground running in a virtual event. TCC is a program that is available to disadvantaged communities. So this project was focused on 3 census tracts, all disadvantaged, which I think for a lot of planners put some light bulbs up in our heads, that these are not necessarily the communities that we've seen increase in engagement. We've seen on a lot of our CEQA projects at my company, where people are at home and are used to their computers and people have office jobs are really ready to engage, and that wasn't necessarily what we were seeing here. And that I like to highlight when you're thinking about disadvantage or the divide, why, especially with low income people, it's not necessarily that they don't have the internet, but probably a lot more cell phone dependent. So really thinking through that. And another truth here is that these communities were linguistically isolated. There were a lot, and thank God for the census, which is a little outdated, but we still had some good data, knowing that a lot of these households didn't have adults that spoke English well over the age of 16. So, and Spanish was going to be the primary language we needed to do a lot of engagement in, and then wrote an engagement plan where everything happened in both languages the whole way. It wasn't just high level translation. Everything was happening in both languages. So we run meetings. We run 2 separate meetings. They happen in both languages, and we're really lucky we have a native Spanish speaking planner on staff who's fluent in planning and fluent in Spanish. And it's been working really well with the community. And then last and the most challenging thing is it's state funded. I love the state of California, I do, but trying to fit in to grant requirements and proving your outreach and how to record it when this is all brand new was definitely a challenge for us. Next slide. So when thinking about an outreach plan and virtual engagement, the first thing I would say to do is create an outreach hub. You know, we used to have community centers and places people would gather, and now that's the internet. So thinking through, where does everything live? Where do people go if they decide that they care about this plan? How do people register interest and get updated? People are not going to be checking your planning websites every day unless they're real bored. So thinking about how to, if you visit once, can they like something, can they click on something, can they subscribe to an email? So our website, which I'm showing here, this is from my phone. Again, really thinking through, is your population one that's just going to have access to a cell phone but not a computer, making sure that's mobile friendly so they can go in and sign up for emails. They can email a project website, which just forwards to my Outlook, but really they can engage and stay there, and we can inform them about other things that are going on. And then also connecting public with the planners. We're talking a lot about how to rethink kind of like a coffee with a cop, but with the city planning staff, because you can't just go to the counter anymore. And so figuring out how there's just one place that serves as that online meeting area that all the information is saved and you can interact with. Probably not the city website, although you certainly can add everything there. The city websites aren't the most engaging or natural places to go. So thinking about how you're going to do that, and you're welcome to go to our website and check it out. I think it's pretty great, but definitely thinking through having some place for everything to live. Next slide. So then designing your outreach. And my favorite saying is, there's no silver bullet, there's only silver buckshot. So really understanding that you are not going to find one tool that's going to solve all your problems. And by solve all your problems, I really mean engage with a diverse public. Zoom webinars can be great. They're not going to reach everyone. Just because of age and other issues of interaction, and really just personality and levels of engagement, you need to be using multiple tools. Again, really thinking through this smartphone, phone, computer. I think smartphones are really good way to go in a lot of communities, but with rural communities, it's using the actual phone and being really explicit about that in your language. In communities that don't have a lot of internet access, maybe not calling it a virtual meeting, but a phone call. And then think about other supplemental tools that you're going to need to run that meeting. If it's a phone meeting, you might need to figure out visuals and like dropping them off in a center, a place where people still go, maybe a grocery store, and can pick them up for the meeting. But really thinking through those logistics of what physical tool am I using, and what supplemental tools do I need to support that. And then my rule is, we're trying to avoid how to have people like download the Zoom app on their phones. Even if you're using a smartphone, we really want to reduce those barriers. So some ideas that we've been using: webinars, obviously, which quite frankly, I don't think have been the best tool for us, and we're really pivoting away from a long 1 hour meeting of me talking. Office hours is something we're pivoting to more now. So doing shorter meetings where we run the same, it's still an hour of my time and our planner's time, but we run the same PowerPoint, a 15-minute PowerPoint 4 times over a meeting, and the advertisement is much more drop in, talk to us, a much more conversational, more of an open house, and then also streaming those to social media instead of making people register for a Zoom and sit down, making it a much more informal, easy thing to go to. Surveys are always great and supplemental. Always great to also review survey outreaches during a meeting. And the last thing we're trying is these photo and picture submissions, which really get at the younger population. We have forms on the website where people can draw their own photos of their dream Indio, or take a picture of something they like or don't like. And then there's a really quick form on our website where they just upload the photo and then write, we have questions of, is something you like or you don't like, describe it a little bit, and then can we use it in our plan, which is also a great way to get pictures of your plan if you are an out-of-town planner and cannot drive on site anymore to get pictures of the community you're working in. So we've been really thinking about just using a lot of these tools to figure out how to engage the diverse public we're working with, even though it is these really small census tracts. Next slide. So advertisement has been the hardest, and if anyone has any ideas, please email me after this because we're struggling, to be really frank. It's really, really hard. People aren't going out as much, and if they are, they have a mask on, hopefully, and they're not looking around for your flyers, and that's just been really difficult for us. We're trying to think about how people get information normally, but also in this new time. Are people going to the city's website? Was that functional before? Is it just functional now because people are trying to get updates all the time? Does the city have social media, and does that work? We've been utilizing school emails because obviously parents are really engaged with if someone's going to take their child this year, so they can get some work done, and they need to pay attention to those. And we have been using direct mailers. Those are expensive, but for us, we have 3 census tracts, small geographic area, and it's really important that we get those residents involved and not, the usual suspects that wouldn't even live in our project area. And we figured, hey, they'll get to their house where they are sheltering in place. They will learn about these meetings. So that's definitely been really hard. We using other mediums, especially to advertise a Zoom meeting. You don't want to put a URL up on something someone's driving by, and then no contact. They don't want to take a flyer. So that's been difficult. And I think the biggest challenge for us is how to get people to even know about these meetings, especially if they aren't already dialed in to the city's usual conversation pathways before the pandemic. If you do reach the public, I always say you should have a clear ask or invitation, so it's really obvious what you want the citizen to do. Is it sign up for a webinar? Is it do a survey? Maybe have a couple options, but it's pretty obvious where to go, what to do, and then reminders. I don't know about you guys, but I just live with my Outlook reminding me what to do every day. So being able to set those up and remind people to show up to things, I think is great because we're all getting a little COVID brain, as I like to call it. So making sure you have reminders for everyone. Next slide. This is my last slide and probably the most challenging. Deliverables and data. And there's a really important kind of sidebar to this of managing expectations and understanding how you're going to use the data. It's important for us as planners to understand what we're actually going to do with this outreach to make it meaningful in our plans, but also communicating that to the public. We always struggle, and I'm sure that everyone on the line does too. You show up to a public meeting, you say, we want your input, and someone goes, well, I told you to build a park on 4th and I Street 10 years ago, nothing's happening, what are you doing? And so at the outset, really understanding what you need to understand from the public and how you're going to use it. It's going to help you design better outreach, ask better questions, and then manage those questions better. So thinking about how to make it inclusive and broad and prove that you, especially if you have to show to the state or anyone else, your city council, that you did an inclusive and broad strategy. Thinking about your raw data and saving it, because now that we can't do engagement, I really want all of the data that all the cities have been working on for the general plans. Rarely is it saved. So what data are you getting from your consultants, and where can you save it so that it's useful in other plans, so that if you're doing targeted engagement, you can use this on the next plan that's semi-related, or the implementation of it. Your write-ups and how you interact with qualitative data, especially photos and pictures, those can be a little bit more difficult. And then, using this outreach in other plans, especially if you're undergoing a comprehensive effort, that outreach data is really, really important for everyone, every other plan that you do. So figuring out how to save it and use it for everything else, so that your public isn't getting outreach fatigue. And of course, meeting state requirements. If you have to meet grant requirements, really understanding that at the set, and how you're going to prove out things like lists of people that attended, comments, and catalog those things. But I think the biggest question here with what you're going to get from the public is, at first step, ask yourself, what do you need to know? For us on TCC, it was, what projects do you want and where? So it was thinking about a lot of mapping, which is hard online, and we're thinking about a couple of tools, and values, but really understanding the questions you want to ask first before you operationalize that, I think is key. I see a lot of cart before the horse. Okay, we need to go to Zoom, and it's like, oh, we need to know what we're asking first, and then maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's a survey, it's probably 4 or 5 things, but really understanding what you need first and how you can use that and record it is always paramount when you're doing any sort of engagement online, in person or not. Next slide. That's all I have, but if you have advertisement ideas for the TCC plan, please email me, or if you have any questions, you can also obviously contact me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rose. We do see some questions coming in, but please continue to type those into the questions box and we will get to them shortly. Up next, we have Brooke with the City of Indio, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenter over to you, Brooke, so that you can get started. And I think you're muted.
Did we just take this from Margaret's virtual bingo right now? I think so.
A couple of those already.
I wanted to, can everyone see my screen here? I wanted to let everyone know how I got involved in this process and my relationship with Rose as things have progressed for Indio TCC, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background too on the City of Indio, how we got involved and how it relates to some of the nitty-gritty of what we've been talking about for the last 54 minutes or so. So let me show you here. I'm Brooke Beare. As of last year, I had a different career. That's not me, that's actually my daughter. And I brought home an Emmy. So my life was, as you might expect, glamorous. It's actually not very glamorous in television news, but a lot of people think so, and that trophy makes people think so even more. Now, let's fast forward to 2020, and this is my office now. We're all wearing masks. We've got a selfie light. Maybe you noticed that that mirror and that can of hairspray in the corner. Some evidence of what goes on behind the scenes in the office of a director of communications and marketing. Indio is the oldest city in the Coachella Valley. If you're not familiar with that area, people know it better as the Greater Palm Springs area. It was birthed 90 years ago this May as a stop between Yuma, Arizona and LA for the Southern Pacific Railroad. People refer to the whole area as Palm Springs. That whole area has about 450,000 people, but here in the city of Indio, we actually have about 100,000 people, mostly year-round residents. We are the largest city, and that population is roughly double of that of Palm Springs. But if you do not know us as the largest city in the Coachella Valley, maybe you know us as the city of festivals. If anyone can recognize what that photo is from, it is from the Coachella Music and Arts Festival. It actually takes place in the city of Indio, and this year would have been Coachella's 20th anniversary, except guess what happened? Coronavirus. And so the namesake for our city of festivals, wasn't going to happen. So what was going to happen? Well, some of the projects that Rose was talking about, for example, the Transformative Climate Communities Plan. So what was that? Well, it was an opportunity to bring urban greening, housing, a sense of community and transportation to those specific neighborhoods that Rose mentioned. And some of the things that she did prior to this was organize public meetings, publicizing in local papers, mailings, English, Spanish. And what we found was that the results were mixed. I helped engage things at a city level, and I used my usual bag of tricks, which would be to utilize our Automall Jumbotron. We put a banner directing people to the website on our own city website. We rolled out social media, and I also did specific media pitches. I want to point out here that Rose talked about the use of a specific website for these plans. I would say that that's a great idea, because if you have the ability to use a consultant, as we do for this specific project, you're not reliant on staff to update the website with each new change in the process. So this was especially important in the age of COVID, because so much changed throughout the process. And I was involved in another project just prior, just at the beginning of COVID, in which that was something that I needed to do on the city website. And I believe that although you can have a landing point on your municipal agency's website, it's probably better to have one of your own. So that other project that I'm talking about was an interchange project. It was a regional project, even though the interchange itself was in our particular city. This really impacted people throughout the entire area who were commuting to and from work, etc. So the Monroe Project took place at the beginning of COVID, Transformative Climate. We were already a couple of months into it. And I want to let you know about the participation in the virtual meetings that were held for these two projects. So these were public engagement projects that at one point would have been in person. They had to turn virtual. The Monroe Project, again, that was the first one, 12 English-speaking participants and 0 Spanish-speaking participants. These were two separate meetings that were held, one in English, one in Spanish, over Zoom. The TCC project had 19 English-speaking participants and 4 in Spanish-speaking participants. Again, a whole hour of a Zoom call running through PowerPoints. So a little bit more engagement for the TCC plan. Who knows why, but we felt like we could continue to do better. And by doing that, we wanted to keep engagement going throughout the hot summer months. It's about 115 degrees today in the city of Indio. You can imagine that people get away if they can. So we wanted to try something new, and this is what we did.
Put a shade structure over them. There's various ways to do it, but that's the kind of feedback we need. And then again, we could decide how we want to approach the state funding entities that are appropriate for what we want to do and make our best case for them to help support what the community wants.
We've actually got it. You guys don't believe it. We can take this maybe just a couple more minutes because I think we've talked a lot, but we did get a couple of more comments here, so we might as well share them. This is from the same person, who was talking about the fence and the shade structure and keeping those plants from the living desert, but also on the housing front, affordable housing for young families and elderly to work and live together, intergenerational communities. So what you just saw right there is what we're going to call a social broadcast. This was a really neat opportunity for us to try something new and to engage people in the ways that Rose described, so that we weren't asking people to sit down and give an hour or so of their time to something that they might have a passing interest in, but really just alert them to what this meant and how it could impact their community. And what was very neat about this, we used a particular software that I can share with you later on, but it was live streamed to Facebook. It has the ability to live stream to a number of different platforms at the same time. And that also means you have the ability to live stream it to your website if you want to do so. You can live stream it to YouTube. And some of the benefits of having it live streamed to social media is that people who are just idly scrolling their feeds, who a lot of people are right now, don't have to make this an appointment in their lives. You have the opportunity to catch people who might not necessarily be engaged to this particular plan, but will see it if they happen to be on social at the time that an alert goes out or a time that they are really in this live broadcast. We were also able to, using this broadcast, get a reach of over 2,600 people. And that is roughly, and Rose, if you want to jump in right now, you might have your microphone on mute right now. This is just a little bit under the number of people who actually live in the communities that we're talking about, those 2 or 3 neighborhoods that have been earmarked for this plan. We also found that over the course of this broadcast, which happened just at the beginning of July, we had over 600 unique viewers. So that doesn't mean one person watched it a bunch of times. That means we had over 600 people. And at any point in our broadcast, we had 17 viewers during the peak of when it was going on live. However, as you see, over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, that number has greatly increased. We were also able to, using the data that was provided to us via the social media platform, find out that we had a peak of live viewers at a certain number of minutes into the broadcast. So for example, our broadcast peaked at the 3-minute, the 19, and the 23-minute mark. And we were able to see exactly what was being discussed during those times. Also, we were able to ascertain that at one point we had 54 viewers who watched for more than a minute. So people who maybe caught a little bit of it were interested and continued watching, which is quite a bit higher than you get for an average broadcast on Facebook. We also found out a little bit about our demographics, and that meant that a majority of the viewers who are watching were watching locally. And within the last 4 months, we also know that we had 3 specific days in which people returned to this video and viewed the video for an average of 20 to 40 minutes. So that's all data that we were able to get right from Facebook, didn't pay for it, and that will help shape the way that we continue our engagement. A little bit more on this and just general video engagement. It actually, in our case, generates 4 times more traction than words. So what we find is that, for example, our 10 most popular social media posts within a week, of those, 4 out of 10 will be from video. And when we're talking about an average of about 80 different posts a week, to have 4 of the top 10 be videos says a little bit about what people are engaged in and what they want to see. Because of that, we have started daily 2:30 p.m. videos on our Facebook channel. Those videos are then repopulated to our YouTube page for the city. These aren't just self-produced videos. I don't have the time to do that all the time, but they're videos from our Convention and Visitors Bureau. We mine our utility companies and their own abilities to engage, and making sure that those that are most representative of whatever our current story is prominently displayed on our website. A couple things about engagement. This seems pretty obvious, but if you look at the bottom of your screen there, engagement equals engagement. Well, that makes sense, right? But what that means is that when people participate, it creates a buzz. And that's not just a buzz through algorithms. Here's an example. We rolled out another project recently, Big Belly Solar Waste and Recycling Stations. I was able to utilize a relationship with the local media. It got a spot on the local news, and because of that, it was picked up for publication in the next issue of PM magazine, so watch for that. So when you start to get people talking about a topic, people talk about it even more. I would also say influencers equal engagement. This does not mean that we are tapping Kim Kardashian to talk about things for us. An influencer could mean, in the case of the TCC project, we reached out specifically via email to a planning commissioner who has a relationship with the city in a number of different capacities and knows a lot of people. When she hopped on, we can see in the analytics of our social broadcast that once she started piping in, more people did so as well. You can also identify those people within your own organization who can be your influencers. That could mean they can act as spokespeople or also as messengers. It's very easy to send someone an email and say, hey, we are doing this, can you help with that? And you would be surprised at the sort of network that they can bring to you with very little work. Also, recognize that not all engagement is driven by those who are vested in the issue. This might mean your keyboard warriors. I'm going to say this, as engagement isn't always honest engagement. Margaret mentioned the fact that a lot of times the people that we see engaging are often the same people. But in the case of our social broadcast, we were also able to note that more than 40% of those who watched our social broadcast on Indio TCC were not actually followers of the City of Indio Facebook page. They had seen someone else watching it, and for whatever reason, it popped up in their feed. And now we just grew our audience, not only to the issues that we are trying to tell people about, but also to this particular issue. We also hear that access is engagement, meet people where they are. We can continue saying all the information can be found on our website or the Indio TCC website, but we still have people reach out to us and say, I'm not seeing whatever you're talking about. Why isn't it on Facebook? There are some people who just walk around with their phones and open social media apps, and they don't navigate the World Wide Web. The other day, I spent a majority of the day trying to reach someone in particular, and the next day got an email from them, which wasn't even the way I was reaching out to them, and they said, I don't even use that phone call. So you need to know, as Rose talked about, how people best communicate and tailor that to whatever issue that you're talking about. And the last thing is capacity. You might say the best way to reach people in this particular instance is through direct mail, or the best way to reach people is through updating the website or pushing out on social media. But all of that takes a lot of energy. So Melissa, I'm going to ask you right now, I don't know if I have to stop screen sharing right now, but I would like you to roll the poll.
Yes, if you can stop sharing your screen, I'll pull this back over.
And so this is a question that I thought really spoke to a lot of people right now, what a lot of people are going through, and it speaks to capacity. So I have a beautiful office to myself for my department of one. So I'm usually enlisted to help people through the process of what they're working on, for example, the Indio TCC plan. So what we're asking right now is how many people in your agency are responsible for community engagement. Maybe people have different titles for what they do. Maybe they're community development, they have a specific budget for it. Maybe you're the communications department and you get it after the fact. But I'd like to hear from those people who are watching right now, how many people are responsible for community engagement? So this is great to hear that it looks like the majority of what we're seeing here have 3 or more people on staff. Everyone is always looking to do more with less. And I'm curious to know, no dedicated staff, 15% saying 2 people. Well, this is great. I'd love to hear how you work together. And that's going to, I think, go to my next point. So I'm going to go ahead and get that all loaded up. And
so I'm going to go ahead and close this out for you, Brooke, and then I'll give you back the controls.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So what we're seeing right now, again, is the next step here. And I'm going to talk about capacity and cost. I think I went a little too far there. Capacity and cost. So teamwork. That means not just who is on your team, but members of other teams and how you can get them to work with you. Some people cast a very wide net and they earmark people on other teams to work with them. You can also utilize free services. Social media is free. The software I use for that social broadcast, it is free. Since then, we have found it to yield a pretty great return on the investment. So we are going to invest in the paid version of it. But even that, when we're talking about just a couple of $100s, it's quite a bit less than some other tools that we've used in the past. Even Facebook, if you're not familiar with it, it translates for free and also does free auto captioning for live broadcasts. Use your influencers, that's a network that is free, send emails. We also saw that we put in a little bit of effort to become verified on both Facebook and on Instagram. And when we became verified on Instagram, we saw our followers on that platform jump 30% in 4 months. And I spend my energy not on the actual post on Instagram, but on the stories. And when you become verified, you're able to add web links to your stories, which is not something you can do on that platform in any other way. And that is a direct link to whatever channel we are trying to promote. So for example, after our social broadcast, we were able to link to IndioTCCplan.com. This is another tool that you can use is establishing relationships with reporters. They're often looking for stories. And again, you're trying to generate some buzz. All of this are ways that you can leverage our ability to work digitally right now. Translate. Use staff to the extent that you can under their MOU to help them translate materials, and use your community partners to translate. You can make that a part of your contract or simply ask them for it. Whenever someone asks me to disseminate information, I ask them, do you also have that in Spanish? And they'll give me the copy for it in Spanish so that I don't have to spend my time or my budget on getting those translation services. And also, of course, inventory your manpower. What is your return on investment? What does it cost to put out the mailing versus holding an online public meeting? Is your budget stretched out right now? This is another way that you can negotiate it. A couple of other ways that we have tried to strengthen our outreach right now, our public engagement, is by utilizing our relationship with community partners. This isn't digital, but it is a way that we are communicating with the public. You see there the Empire Polo Club. It is actually the home of the Coachella Music and Arts Festival. Our fire chief noticed that the sign there was blank. And so we simply called them up and said, hey, can you help us communicate this message that we have going on? And the next thing you know, they're helping us stop the spread and wear a mask. We also have a relationship with the local auto mall. They lease the land to put this particular signage up for us, and so we're allowed to use it. We get a certain number of plays for our messages every day, and when COVID hit, I simply asked them, can you increase our rotation? And they increased it sixfold. We also asked the county fairgrounds to use our images on their Jumbotron, and they did. So noticing those things that are going to catch some eyeballs while you're moving around, because some people still are, those are all useful. And the last thing here is we do utilize a local organization that has a studio, because we don't have one here at the city of Indio, and they help us produce weekly videos with the mayor. In this case, this was a very successful video that we did. We put it out on our website as well as on all of our other social media channels, in which he sat down with the police chief about 21st century policing. So a lot of ways to continue to have public engagement right now. As we wrap up, I just want to let everyone know that you do not have to come from a career in broadcast journalism to feel comfortable participating in digital engagement. Feel free to try new ideas. You can't do them all, certainly, but definitely try one. Be authentic in what you're doing, but also be professional and make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So, for example, in this particular space that we're in right now, we are creating a clear, clutter-free environment around you as we continue to do these virtual meetings, these Zoom meetings, these social broadcasts, whatever you're using to connect directly to your residents. And I would suggest that virtual backgrounds are a novelty and that they should not be used when absolutely necessary. People lean on them in order to hide their hairspray or their mirrors or their clutter in the background, but they're very distracting, and that's something that we have realized when we are doing our virtual council meetings too, that people want to hear, you want to be able to hear what people are saying, and if they're distracted because your head keeps blending into an environment that's obviously not where you are, they're not listening to what you're saying. I would also say wear appropriate clothing, use a light in front of you. So I'm going to break the fourth wall right here, and I'm going to show you what we have going on here. And I think we saw it a little bit earlier, but we're cheating just a little bit. I do have a light, but not everyone has something like that. You don't have the materials, you don't want to invest in something like that. I would just suggest do not put a light in back of you, always put a light in front of you. By now, we've been doing so many virtual meetings that it should be old hat, but I would be amazed. I'm always amazed when I go into these meeting spaces and see that that's not what's happening. And that all being said, no one is expected to be a tech expert, but as face-to-face contact is pretty much eliminated right now, we need to embrace the technologies that are available to us, and also own up to your mistakes, move on, but don't be afraid to try something new. Digital media in particular is very forgiving. It's very easily editable. I think a lot of times in government, we think, all right, we're going to put something out and that's going to be it. But if we treat some things, particularly in this digital environment, like living documents, I think that will be much more successful. So thank you to everyone. I hope that you all found this useful, and this is how you can contact me in the future. Melissa.
Thank you so much, Brooke. While I translate this back to me as the presenter, we have received a few questions about what platform you used for your social broadcast. Can you share which platform you used?
Yes. Have I stopped sharing now? You took that away from me?
Yep.
So in this particular instance, we used a software called StreamYard, and I was actually alerted to it because at the same time, the exact same time as that Monroe Street Overpass project virtual public hearing was going on, a local school district was trying to conduct a public meeting to update people on what was going to be happening with schools, and they were trying to elicit feedback. And I watched sort of my counterpart at the school district very seamlessly negotiate the ability to take in comments from the public and address them in real time. I would say that this software, and there are others that are similar to it, would be a cross between, say, a Zoom and a Facebook Live. So you're doing a Zoom meeting in real time, but also being able to take comments from the public at the same time. And we found when we did this, and Rose, please join in too when you want, because she was so great in her participation with this too, that we found that when people started commenting, we got a ton of additional comments.
So we will be getting to Q&A in just a minute. I have a couple more slides that I want to go through. In the interest of time, I won't spend too much time here, but definitely just want to address some of the challenges. So some of this has already been talked about before, but a couple of just quick tips here. On the internet access and technology access side of things, we're seeing a lot of local governments working with nonprofit or community-based organization partners that can oftentimes either help provide hotspots or that access and or the devices needed for people to actually participate in your meetings or your engagement efforts. The language access piece is huge. We talked about that a little bit, but just one note here. So in addition to the actual translation of the meetings, the interpretation of the meeting, make sure you're thinking through all of the other pieces there. Do you have materials that need to be translated, or are you doing polling or have a PowerPoint or things like that? So just make sure you're thinking through the breadth of the things that need to be translated there. A few tips on virtual meeting design. A lot of this has also been covered as well. Make sure you're explaining the platform up front. Try to vary your voices and keep your quote lectures to less than 10 or 15 minutes so that you're keeping people engaged. Varying that with exercises or polling or other things other than just lecture. Let's see what else here. Yeah, try to engage them, let them tell their stories if the platform allows. Solicit those questions and comments as possible. Another tip here is to use softball opening questions. So obviously we did that with the polling by asking about the coffee. It gets people familiar with the platform you're using, the other meeting participants, and your facilitators. So just a few tips here. Happy to talk more about any of these offline, but just wanted to share a few tips with you as you guys are thinking through a lot of virtual meetings that I'm sure you're doing. And then lastly, before we get into questions, this has also been touched on a lot, but here are some key considerations when you're thinking about choosing the right approach or your right platform. Think about who's in your community. Who are you trying to engage? What is the purpose of the engagement, and what is the input you're seeking? Where are you in the process? You don't want to ask people for feedback when it's going to council next week and you can't actually incorporate any of their feedback. What tools and approaches will help you get to those goals? And then think through, again, that mix of high-tech and low-tech options. So again, we've probably talked about this a lot, but just making sure you're matching your approach with your goals, with your budget, with your staffing, with your timeline. All of those things need to align. So we do have time for a few questions here, and we've seen a lot come through. Feel free to keep sending them in, and as I said, we will get to a few right now, and then obviously feel free to reach out to us after the fact. So let's see here. We had one question around cell phones and what the best platforms for cell phones are. I've seen a few, and then other people jump in if you have any other ideas. But obviously, Rose talked about this a little bit, but ensuring that your website or whatever platform you're using is mobile responsive, so people can actually see your website or whatever it is platform you're using on the cell phone. Social media is obviously super accessible via phone. There's a polling software called Poll Anywhere. I'll double check that and send that out to you. But it's a phone-based polling software where people just essentially kind of text things back in. Flashvote is another polling software that does something similar, but it is a more scientific approach in terms of gathering that feedback. Do any of the presenters have any other phone-based softwares that they've used to a lot of success? If anybody's trying to talk, you're muted. Any other phone softwares? No? Okay. Let's see here. What other questions?
Now I'm unmuted. So you can use Zoom and stream to, there's a button, I don't know how to use it, my Zoom wizard does. Thankfully we have marketing staff that can do it, but you can use Zoom and then stream it to Facebook. So if you're worried about using social media natively because people need accounts to log in, which is a concern that we had on staff even with the CIS of our Facebook meeting, you can still use Zoom and then pump it through to Facebook and you have both. And then they don't need an app. They can just go on Facebook.
Got it. No, that's helpful. Rose, while you're talking, we did have a couple of questions that came in for you.
Sure.
We had somebody that really liked your office hours idea. But so how do you measure your level of engagement on that tool? Is it just based on how many people call in or access the office hours, or do you have any other metrics that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, any questions we record, partially just because then we want to, if they're recommendations of the plan, we use them. But yeah, it's going to be a head count of people that come in. But yeah, we're really trying to figure out how to best run those. Right now, we're using a Zoom stream to Facebook, but just trying to advertise it more as just come in, just chat with us, ask any questions, and making it more more informal, kind of just doing a brief presentation at the beginning to kind of get them wedded to the project idea.
Perfect. This is kind of a general question. We've talked about a couple of live stream platforms via Facebook Live. What are you guys finding to be most effective? Brooke, I think you're muted.
I'm muted by the organizer. Okay. So most recently, we have been trying this new StreamYard platform. We used it again yesterday. It was pretty effective. And now, because we have the ability, you can stream, I believe, up to 6 different platforms at one time. We also use, for our council meetings, another type of software called Swagit, in which we can then schedule ahead to Facebook. And all of these tools are really good because they give you the ability to make an announcement on that platform that there is a live broadcast coming. So people get that alert, even if they weren't planning on watching. Usually they get some kind of notification.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or anything that's worked well?
And I would add that sorry?
Go ahead.
I would add that the organizations that I've seen use Zoom for their streaming board or city council meetings do so really well, but sometimes there have been glitches in the type of streaming service or tool that's used. Like you can choose webinar or meeting or some other category. And depending on what's used, it can limit or make more difficult public engagement. So if you're thinking about using Zoom or any of these other streaming platforms, make sure that if you have a requirement for public Q&A or public comment, that you have it set up the right way to facilitate that. Again, it's just part of the learning curve, but with all of the different streaming options, make sure you set it up right.
Yep.
So related to that, in terms of the streaming, we have a question about closed captioning. Have you guys run into any of that? It sounds like obviously there's some requirements there with ADA pieces. So how are you guys navigating that?
Zoom does a post captioning after And then depending on our budget, sometimes we have staff in-house that will caption after. We haven't seen a push for real-time captioning yet, but I think as soon as like Brown Act and other laws kind of catch up with this sort of service, we're going to be seeing that a lot more. And my hope and assumption is that the technology companies we're spending money on doing this will start providing those services according with state law. So we're just not there yet, other than posting it to YouTube with the captions later.
And Facebook does allow live auto captioning, closed captioning. It's not always perfect, but it's a setting that you can find. And if anyone else has understood this too, Facebook, even if you aren't sure where to find something and you kind of Google it, it doesn't always lead you to the right place. So it just takes a little bit of messing around to find the right settings, but that is something that you can do in multiple languages.
We just have a couple more minutes. Rose, Brooke, it looks like there's still some people that had a hard time hearing what software you're using. Can you repeat it one more time? Or if you can send me the link, I can send it out in the follow-up email.
Sure, there's a couple of different technologies, but the one that we're trying right now is called StreamYard. It was very easy to use. I will say that because I've been facilitating some of those, it does get a little bit tricky. I'm sure like how Hayley and Melissa are behind the scenes technical directing. You're moderating a conversation at the same time as you're trying to move screens around, but it has a very slick look. I was able to even put our city logo on things with very minimal effort and screen share. And so even you have the capacity to run videos. So if you wanted to start a conversation and show a video of what the project is, you have the ability to do that too, just as if you were running a PowerPoint.
Okay, we just have about one more minute, so I want to share quickly some additional resources for you all. I'm sure some of you are working on housing element updates and things like that. We have an entire dedicated toolkit to public engagement in housing. Additionally, we have a lot of resources on language access. We have a whole framework to help embed public engagement into your operations, and then a whole host of other things around working with community-based organizations, reaching diverse populations, a lot of things like that. So please check out our website and find a lot of resources there. These were mentioned up front, but we have a few upcoming webinars. Both our partners at MMANC and SC are doing weekly webinars, so the next two coming up are there. And from the ILG front, we are doing one on rethinking natural disasters after COVID later in August. So please check out those on the websites listed there and join us as possible. Here's our social handles in case you want to follow us on Facebook or Twitter or sign up for our monthly newsletter. And then I definitely want to share our contact information here. Unfortunately, we definitely weren't able to get to all of the questions. So if we didn't get to your question, please reach out to one or all of us after the fact. If you want to send them to me, I'm happy to distribute them to the speakers or answer them to the best of my ability, or reach out directly to any of the panelists on the phone. Brooke, Rose, Margaret, do you guys have any closing thoughts or comments?
No, I love this sharing of ideas. We're all struggling right now to reach people when we can't see them. And so I know that people who are watching have their own ideas, and I would love to hear those too. Email me.
Yeah.
We're happy to take questions.
Well, perfect. So thanks the three of you for joining us as panelists today and sharing your experiences and thoughts on this. Definitely want to thank MMANC and SC for partnering with us on developing this webinar. And thank you to all of you on the phone for joining us for part of your day. Hopefully we provided you with some good tips. And if you have questions, please follow up. Thank you and have a great afternoon.